Imagine sitting in a lobby for 2 hours while everyone else gets called in. And the second they realize who you are, everything changes. If Danielle McLean had known how that morning was going to turn out, she would have worn her more comfortable heels. The sharp ones she had on were better suited for quick meetings and fast exits, not waiting. But there she was, standing under the tall glass awning of Westbridge Corporate Plaza in Scottsdale, Arizona, portfolio tucked firmly under her arm, ready for what she thought would be a life-changing meeting. She had prepped for weeks, mock interviews, research, endless note-taking. Danielle had imagined every possible question Craig Ellison, the regional manager, could throw her way. Her nerves weren't exactly calm, but she was focused, laser-focused. She was the first to arrive, 15 minutes early, just like she'd always been taught. Early is on time is late. Inside the lobby, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and expensive cologne. A giant sculpture of twisting metal greeted her near the elevators. Danielle walked up to the front desk where a young receptionist, chewing discreetly on gum, glanced up. "Hi, I'm Danielle McLean. I have a 10 a.m. meeting with Craig Ellison." The receptionist tapped at her keyboard with a manicured nail, then picked up the phone. After a brief whisper, she gave Danielle a nod. "Mr. Ellison said he'll be right with you. Please have a seat." Danielle smiled politely and sat down near the floor-to-ceiling windows. She crossed her legs, adjusted her skirt, and placed her portfolio neatly on her lap. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. 15. At first, she wasn't concerned. Meetings run late all the time. Important people are busy. She scrolled through her phone, checking last-minute notes. Her stomach fluttered, but she kept telling herself, "Stay calm. Stay professional. You're here because you deserve to be." A half hour ticked by. Danielle stood up, smoothed her blazer, and returned to the front desk. "Excuse me," she said warmly. "Just wanted to check if Mr. Ellison is still available." The receptionist, who hadn't moved much from her chair, flashed the kind of tight smile that felt less like an answer and more like a full stop. "He's wrapping up a call. He said he'll be right with you." Danielle thanked her and returned to her seat. This time she sat a little straighter. The air around her felt heavier. Was she being impatient? Was this normal here? She watched as two men in suits walked in, laughing about a golf game. The receptionist immediately jumped up, offering them coffee, leading them through the doors without a second thought. Danielle blinked. Maybe they had appointments too. Maybe not. She didn't want to assume anything. Still, a tightness started building in her chest. Not anger, not yet, but a deep, stubborn feeling that something wasn't right. But she shook it off and told herself, "Don't make a scene. Don't be that woman." She checked her phone again. 10:58 a.m. Nearly an hour had passed. She adjusted her blazer again, her fingers fidgeting at the seams, her professional armor beginning to fray just slightly at the edges. But little did Danielle know, this was just the beginning of her longest morning yet. By 11:15 a.m., Danielle's back was starting to ache against the stiff lobby chair. She shifted her weight, trying to keep the strain out of her expression. Even in discomfort, she kept her face composed, her shoulders relaxed. If anyone was watching, and she was starting to think nobody really was, they'd see a woman fully in control, or at least, that's what she told herself. From her seat, Danielle had a clear view of the front desk. She watched as two more visitors arrived, both white men in crisp button-downs and chinos. They were greeted with handshakes and small talk, offered refreshments, and ushered back with a kind of casual respect that didn't require explanation. Danielle stared for a second too long before blinking herself back to focus. Maybe they have standing meetings, she thought. Maybe they're just more important. But the thought sat in her stomach like a stone. She clutched her portfolio tighter, feeling every minute stretch longer than the last. The receptionist hadn't looked at her again. No one had. Danielle might as well have been part of the furniture. It wasn't just being ignored. It was the way she was ignored. As if her presence was inconvenient. As if her sitting there, waiting patiently, was some kind of silent problem everyone chose to look around. Across the lobby, a janitor emerged, pushing a cart full of supplies. An older man, gray hair tucked under a faded baseball cap. Their eyes met briefly. His glance wasn't dismissive. It wasn't rushed. It was just human. A nod of quiet acknowledgement between two people used to waiting for others to notice them. Danielle smiled softly, then lowered her gaze. She didn't want anyone thinking she was loitering or distracting anyone. Even now, she was calculating every move, every glance, every breath. Minutes later, a tall woman in a sharp navy blue pantsuit walked in. Danielle recognized her immediately. Avery Lindstrom, Vice President of Operations. She had seen Avery on panels before, speaking at leadership summits. The receptionist practically leapt to her feet. "Good morning, Ms. Lindstrom. Can I get you a coffee? Water?" Avery waved her off politely and breezed past, heading straight for the elevators. Danielle's throat tightened. She sat up even straighter, adjusting her blazer again, willing herself to look occupied, important, necessary. At 11:30, Danielle stood up once more and walked with careful steps to the front desk. "Hi," she said, her voice even. "Just wondering if I should reschedule? It's been quite a while." The receptionist looked up, wide-eyed for half a second, like she had forgotten Danielle was even there. "Oh, Mr. Ellison is just finishing up a call. He should be right with you." The same line, the same forced smile, the same nothing. Danielle swallowed hard, the taste of shame creeping up her throat. Shame she didn't ask for. Shame that wasn't hers to carry. She nodded, more to herself than to the woman, and sat back down. This time, when she crossed her legs, she felt the heat behind her eyes. A slow, quiet burn that stayed trapped beneath her polished exterior. She would not cry. She would not shift uncomfortably. She would not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her squirm. In the corner, the clock ticked loud enough for her to hear it. But time wasn't the only thing moving. Something inside Danielle was shifting too, and it wasn't going back. 11:58 a.m. Danielle stared down at her phone, willing the numbers to change slower. 2 whole hours had slipped by, and no one had offered a single real update. The lobby buzzed, not loudly, but in that low, constant movement of footsteps, printers humming, quiet conversations bouncing between glass walls. Life was happening all around her, yet Danielle sat in the middle of it all, unseen, like a shadow nobody wanted to acknowledge. She glanced around the room again. The receptionist was laughing softly with a delivery guy dropping off lunch orders. Across the way, 2 men in sports jackets clinked coffee cups together in a silent toast before heading upstairs. Meanwhile, Danielle sat silent, her own thoughts getting louder. Would they have left a white man sitting here for 2 hours? Would Craig have kept someone else waiting this long without a real explanation? Am I being paranoid? Sensitive? Am I just invisible? She shifted her legs, stretching one slightly to ease the numbness. Her heel made a tiny squeak against the polished marble floor. Instantly, a few people glanced over, quick, flickering looks that landed hard. Not friendly, not curious, annoyed, as if she were the one disrupting something important. Danielle pressed her lips together, her breath hitching in her throat. She uncrossed her legs and sat perfectly still. She thought about her mother, who used to tell her growing up in Little Rock, Arkansas, "You gotta be twice as good, baby girl, just to get half as far." At the time, Danielle thought it was just one of those things older folks said, but sitting here now, in this towering, sparkling lobby, she felt the weight of those words more than ever. She opened her portfolio again, pretending to review her notes, but she had them memorized by now. She wasn't reading, she was hiding. Hiding the shame, the anger, the exhaustion she could feel rising inside her. Suddenly, she caught movement out of the corner of her eye. Craig Ellison. There he was, stepping out of the glass doors behind the front desk. A tall, lean man with a salt and pepper beard and a pressed white shirt. He chatted casually with another manager, laughing at something, a clipboard tucked under his arm. Danielle sat up straighter, willing herself to be seen. Craig's eyes skimmed the lobby. They brushed past her like she was a chair, a table, an afterthought. Then he disappeared again behind another door, never breaking his conversation. Danielle sat back against the chair, a hollow feeling blooming in her chest. Not anger anymore, not confusion. Something deeper, a kind of tiredness that had no bottom. She thought about getting up and leaving, just walking out, saving what little dignity she felt she had left. But she stayed, because she knew deep down, leaving would feel like quitting. And Danielle McLean didn't quit. Not when she knew she deserved better. Not when she knew she had worked twice as hard to even be here. The receptionist glanced at her briefly, then quickly returned to her computer screen. Danielle caught the look. It wasn't sympathy. It wasn't concern. It was a kind of mild irritation, like Danielle was somehow an inconvenience just by existing in that lobby. Danielle clenched her hands in her lap, knuckles whitening against the dark fabric of her skirt. But just as Danielle was beginning to think this day couldn't get any worse, the front doors opened and everything changed in an instant. The sharp click of polished shoes against marble made Danielle look up. Not just one pair, several. The doors had swung wide, and in walked a small group of sharply dressed professionals, 5 in total, moving with a quiet authority that needed no announcement. You could feel the shift in energy, the way the receptionist stood up a little straighter, smoothing her blouse, the way the nearby conversations hushed for just a second. Danielle's heart skipped. She recognized 2 of them instantly, Martin Beasley, CEO of the entire company, and Sandra Whitlock, the Senior Director of Finance. Heavy hitters. People who didn't just make decisions, they made futures. Danielle sat frozen for a beat, unsure if she should stand. But before she could move, Sandra caught her eye and smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine. "Danielle McLean," Sandra called out, her voice cutting clear across the lobby. "I didn't know you were coming in today." The words bounced off the high ceilings, and suddenly, every head in the lobby, including Craig Ellison's, snapped toward Danielle. For a split second, time felt suspended. Danielle stood, smoothing her skirt one last time, slipping the portfolio under her arm like a shield. She walked forward with measured steps, her heels clicking softly, confidently, across the floor. Martin approached her first, extending a hand. "It's good to see you again, Danielle," he said warmly. "We were just talking about you last week. Your presentation at the Leadership Summit? Outstanding work." Danielle shook his hand firmly, offering a calm, gracious smile. "Thank you, Mr. Beasley. It's an honor to see you again." Behind them, Craig Ellison froze in place. His mouth opened slightly, just enough to look foolish, before snapping shut again. He hurried over, his face flushing redder with each step. He looked smaller now, the swagger, the casual arrogance, gone. "Ms. McLean," Craig gushed, his voice suddenly too loud, too bright. "I'm so sorry for the wait. We had a situation come up. No excuse. I apologize personally." Danielle turned toward him, her face a careful mask of polite surprise. 2 hours is a long time for a situation, Mr. Ellison, she said evenly, her voice carrying just enough for the group to hear. Craig's face twitched. Martin raised an eyebrow. Sandra crossed her arms loosely, watching with quiet interest. Craig stammered something about being busy, about calls and emergencies, but no one was listening. The board members were focused on Danielle now, the way she stood, calm and composed, every inch the professional she had always been. Sandra touched Danielle's elbow lightly. "If you have time, why don't you come up to the executive conference room with us? We'd love to pick your brain on a few projects." Danielle smiled graciously. "I'd be happy to." Craig tried to insert himself again, sputtering offers to help carry her things, offering coffee, whatever she needed. Danielle simply turned slightly, aligning herself with Sandra and Martin, leaving Craig standing awkwardly behind. As they walked toward the elevators, Danielle didn't look back, but she could feel Craig's embarrassment burning against her back like the Arizona sun. And for the first time that morning, Danielle allowed herself a small, private smile. But little did Craig know, the real consequences of that morning hadn't even started yet. Inside the executive conference room, everything felt different. The air was lighter, the smiles were real, the conversation flowed easily. Danielle wasn't a forgotten name on a waiting list anymore, she was the center of the room. Martin slid a folder across the glossy table toward her. "We're actually in the early stages of developing a new leadership initiative," he said, "and after seeing your work at the summit, we'd like you to be a part of it." Danielle opened the folder carefully. Inside were plans, timelines, even preliminary budget approvals. They weren't asking her for a meeting. They were offering her a seat at the table. Sandra leaned in, her voice low but firm. "We need more people like you, Danielle. People who see the gaps before anyone else does. People who know how to lead without stepping on others to get there." Danielle nodded slowly, absorbing it all. She asked sharp questions, made pointed suggestions, and noticed how genuinely they listened. Not out of politeness, but out of respect. Across the hall, visible through the glass, Craig Ellison hovered awkwardly near his office. He peeked toward the conference room a few times, probably trying to figure out how the woman he had kept waiting, the woman he hadn't even bothered to acknowledge, was now being courted by the most powerful people in the company. Danielle caught his glance once and met it head on. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just looked at him, steady, calm, unbothered. And then she turned back to the real conversation in front of her. After an hour, Martin stood and extended his hand again. "Think it over," he said. "But personally, I'd love to see you in this role." Danielle shook his hand firmly. "I appreciate the opportunity. I'll give it serious thought." As she gathered her things, Sandra walked her to the door. "By the way," Sandra said lightly, as if mentioning the weather, "if you ever have any issues with how you're treated here, come straight to me. No middlemen." Danielle smiled then. A real one, soft and knowing. "Thank you, Sandra. I'll remember that." The doors closed behind her, leaving Craig standing alone in the hallway, pretending to shuffle papers he wasn't reading. But what Danielle didn't know yet was that this moment would ripple out further than she ever imagined, changing more than just one meeting. The next week, Danielle received an official offer letter. The leadership initiative wasn't just a small project. It was a direct pipeline to a regional executive position, higher pay, real authority, a chance to build something that would outlast her. She accepted, not because she needed validation, not because she wanted revenge, but because she earned it. Every long night, every overlooked email, every silent dismissal she had swallowed over the years. The same morning Danielle's promotion was announced internally, Craig Ellison was called into a closed-door meeting. Word traveled fast. Whispers in the break rooms, side eyes in the elevators. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. His casual arrogance had finally caught up to him. One too many complaints, one too many overlooked meetings, one too many women, especially women of color, left waiting in lobbies like forgotten packages. By Friday, Craig's nameplate was gone from his office door. Danielle didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She simply moved forward, step by step, the way she always had. The first big meeting she led was packed. Department heads, senior managers, new hires. Danielle stood at the head of the long conference table, a crisp white blouse and a slate gray skirt armor enough. She clicked to the first slide of her presentation and said, "Good ideas don't care where they come from. Neither should we." The room leaned in. They listened. Because it wasn't just about one morning anymore. It was about changing the way things were done. Danielle's rise wasn't about ego or revenge. It was about the silent promise she had made to herself, sitting 2 hours in that lobby with nobody looking her way. "I will not let them decide my worth. I will not make myself smaller to fit into rooms I was built to lead." And for every young woman coming behind her, especially the ones who looked like her, Danielle was making sure they wouldn't have to wait nearly as long to be seen. Sometimes, people won't see your value until others recognize it, but that doesn't mean your value wasn't always there. Hold your ground. Stay ready. Your moment will come, and when it does, walk into it without apology. If this story moved you even a little, don't just let it pass by. Share it. Talk about it. Because sometimes, telling one story changes more than one life.